Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our public presentation here at the auditorium of our beloved Athens School of Fine Arts. Today's program will introduce you to the fellows of our 5th Athens Residency, Curatorial Fellow Deniz Kirkali, and Visual Art Fellow Carla Maldonado. After their presentation, there will be an opportunity for you to engage with them and learn more about their practice by asking questions. This will be followed by a short reception. First and foremost, I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude to the Athens School of Fine Arts for their hospitality and for leading the education of fine arts here in Greece. This wonderful campus has inspired all of our fellows as they have offered seminars through Poka-Yio's Lab 12. Poka has been an incredible collaborator, an inspiration, really. Thank you, Poka, for assisting in the manifestation of this evening, and thank you, Evie and Manos, for the warm welcome. Please allow me to take a moment and introduce you to our organization. I'm ARCAthens, a visual artist and the founder and executive director of ARCAthens. Founded in 2017, ARCAthens is a nonprofit organization created in response to the lack of proper and truly supportive residency programs in Athens, and also as a response to the economic crisis at that time. Our mission is to provide opportunities and support to visual artists, curators, and scholars to further their research and focus on bridging international dialogue, cooperation, and understanding. Our flagship program is the Athens Residency, and since its inception, we've added 3 additional programs. The Virtual Residency, Connecting Greece and the Bronx, whose latest participant in July was Amalia Vekri, and the ARCAthens Residency at EPI, a collaboration with Lafayette College's Experimental Printmaking Institute. This annual program is offered to previous ARCAthens fellows and is an example of our commitment to have continuing relationship with our fellows, the ARCAthens family. Our 4th program, the NOLA NYCBX Research Fellowship, focuses on Greek artists and curators, and it just completed its inaugural pilot in June. I have some exciting news to share with you at the end of tonight's presentation about that program. I will now give the stage to the inimitable Poka-Yio, a professor here and a wonderful artist, a founder of the Athens Biennial, a curator, a life coach, and many other things. And he will facilitate tonight's program and introduce our fellows. But before I do also want to thank the jurors of the 5th Athens Residency, the 3 independent professionals who selected our current fellows, Linnea Bach, our 4th Athens Residency Curatorial Fellow, Ash Bulayev, who's a curator, producer, artist, and founding director of Onassis Air, and Wayne Gonzalez, the impactful New York City artist. Okay, Poka, thank you. The floor is yours.
So thank you, Ari. Thank you for the collaboration, ongoing collaboration. We're being in close contact for 5 years now, so it's something that has benefited a lot the artists of Lab 12 and also the school. And I hope it was also fruitful for the residents, each year's residents, which bring their own cosmos each time. Today we have Deniz Kirkali, who is a writer and theorist, curator, and Carla Maldonado, who is an artist, filmmaker. They will bring their world here, share it with us, and I hope we're going to have a good conversation afterwards. Okay? Ladies, who will start first?
Thank you to Aristides and Poka-Yio for the introduction, and thank you to ARCAthens team for this wonderful program and for hosting us in Athens for 2 months. Is this okay if I put this here? So I'm an independent curator from Istanbul and currently based in London as I'm doing my PhD in Goldsmiths University. in advanced practices. It's a practice-based PhD. Okay. It's a practice-based PhD, and I'm basically, it's focused on two of my collective curatorial practices, which tonight I'm going to be focusing on. But I want to start here, which is where my research since 2017 has basically started. Through this book called Gut Feminism by Elizabeth Wilson, who's a writer working very closely with material feminisms. And so I read this book when I was doing my MA in Goldsmiths again in 2017, very randomly, because I was just sitting in at a class that I was not supposed to be in. And then it basically ended up, it got me into this field of material feminisms, and I started reading other theorists such as Karan Barad, Donna Haraway, and then sort of found myself really immersed in this theoretical thread, and I ended up writing my MA dissertation about the microbiome, about the gut as a methodology for collective work. So it was like really looking closely into material bodies to understand if the workings of the body can sort of like suggest ways for living with other people and working with other people as well. And then after my MA, and I was back in Turkey, and this is 2018, we started a project in 2019 with my collaborator, artist Ayşe İdil, called GARP Sessions. GARP Sessions is a summer program. It's not a residency, but we call it a summer program. It takes place in a small fishing village in Turkey near the Lesbos island, actually, for a duration of 10 days. And we invite every year, the structure is that we invite every year 2 facilitators to basically come up with a question or a theme or a concept that they would like to delve into, and then they invite usually 4, but up to 6 participants to take part in the program, and they spend 10 days sort of living in this village and getting to know the surroundings and the people living there, and yeah, just basically getting to know one another as a group. The program does not have any production or outcome expectations. It's such a short period of time anyways, but basically the facilitators are free to come up with their own structure every year, so it really depends on the facilitators' needs and their sort of the decided theme, and so the structure changes a little bit every year. It doesn't remain fixed, which is what we wanted from the beginning anyways. The first year in 2019, we facilitated. It was a pilot year. We came up with a structure that worked for that year, but it kept changing as the conditions and the group's dynamics changed and evolved, basically. The first year, what we did was, it was very important for us, and this was right after I had finished my MA around the gut and thinking a lot about digestion. I thought of the program as a digestion mechanism in itself. So we asked everyone to bring in something into this pile. So we started with what we call teaching sessions, and everyone was expected to teach each other something, and it could have been something from their practices, so super technical, or it could be something as simple as braiding hair or different breeding techniques, which is actually 2 things that we did learn during the program. So, and then we would continue with reading sessions. In 2019, the first session was I think it was the most discursive one. We were just kind of like closed down in this house, doing a lot of readings. And then initially we wanted to have reflection sessions during the last 2 days, which was a terrible idea because it was too early to, having digested anything or like be able to reflect on the process, but people actually needed to just take some time away from it. And then the reflection for us came 6 months later when we had a presentation in Istanbul. But then 2020 came, COVID hit, and basically the group did not want to be spending time in a house, but they wanted to explore the neighboring villages, the area. And I think every year the program kind of, was more and more engaging with the local actors, with the flora and fauna, and like with with the surroundings and the specificities of Babakale, which I think it's a quite unique village, quite different than the other sort of parts, Aegean towns around the area, because it's quite rocky, it's very isolated, hard to get there, it's extremely windy, so basically the entire structure of the days and the programs is really determined by the conditions that we're sort of immersed in. And yeah, this year we just had the 5th session, and we also published a book which was funded by Saha Art Foundation and was published by a independent publishers based in Berlin called Nocturne Platform. This was a quite important moment in our sort of, in the programs, I think, past, because it's a quite close program. It's only, like, it happens only within the up to 10 participants, and we don't necessarily have a lot of documentation from it. We haven't been kind of able to open it up more to a larger public. So the book was an idea, was how we wanted to communicate it and open it up to a lot more people. We also invited outside contributors, but also it's that we have the contributions of almost all the past participants, as well as interviews with some of the craftsmen and people living in the village that we've been sort of building relationships with in the past years. And I actually skipped this one. It's a publication, it's like an online zine that the 2020 group put together. So the more we say you don't have to produce anything or we don't have any expectations, the group sort of ends up producing things almost always collectively. So in 2020, they published this online publication, which is sort of like reflecting on their time in Babakale and the program and some of the conversations that they've had there and the texts that they've been reading. And then in 2021, the group put together a sound bank because the theme was daring oralities. And then last year, for instance, the theme was fermentation, and the group put together a performative dinner for the guests that we had on the last day of the program. So I think slowly we're trying to come up with ways to open it up, but I think it's happening quite intuitively, and we're not really sure whether it's going to be something, if it's going to remain a yearly, a summer program, but maybe we want to have more programming throughout the year as well. I think we see as we go, and we learn throughout the process, which is kind of why we're doing it in the first place. And the cookbook is actually another aspect, an important aspect of the program. The only thing that does not change in the structure is that the group cooks and eats together every evening, no matter how, you know, whatever they do during the day. That changes a lot. Like some years it's like a lot more workshops, and some years it's like more based on studio time or readings, but the dinners remain. And 2 years ago, we self-published this cookbook, which kind of brings together recipes by the past participants of dishes that they cooked in Babakale, or they didn't get to cook because we have a very limited selection of produce that we can get in the village. So it's kind of like a health, documenting health, sort of imaginary recipes put together in a book. And the second project that I would like to focus on and that I'm writing my dissertation about is called Experimental Pedagogies. It's a project we've been doing with Topsoil, a curatorial collective I'm a part of. We met in 2017 in London when we were doing our MAs, and it's with curator Amélie Wedel and curator Sofia Villena Araya. Amélie is based in Berlin, Sofia is based in Costa Rica. So after the MA finished in 2018, we all went in 3 different countries and 3 different continents actually, and we were sort of like trying to understand how to sustain our practice through distance and time differences. And we decided to do an online publication. This is in 2019. And we sort of thought we would have like 1 year of Zoom calls and online meetings, and at the end of it, we would kind of like find some recurring themes, questions, or aspects from our practices that we would like to together in a publication format, which failed terribly because we were not able to find a methodology that worked for us, or like a structure or some kind of structure in our relationship. And then we decided to still make the publication and make it about this failure to communicate, basically, and work together. Because as a curatorial collective, our practice is a lot about how to find ways that work for us and how to work together, basically. So this was an interesting moment in our relationship that we were just not able to work together. And the publication, that's why contains, I mean, it does have some text about our thinking processes, things we were reading at the time, exhibitions we were curating at the time, but also our text messages that are quite passive-aggressive at times, or this like kind of graph that we tried to make when we tried to understood what was not working. So it was a quite experimental project, but that kind of made us understand that our curatorial work is a lot about our friendship and our relationship. So we kind of understood the friendship as a methodology and as a starting point for all the projects that we do, rather than something being constructed through the projects that we do, but we just put it in the center. So we've been trying to analyze and understand our working relationship for the past 3 years. And yeah, so experimental pedagogies, which is a project we started in 2020, that was an interesting moment because after our failure, that became a global kind of challenge to find ways to work remotely with others and communicate via Zoom and Skype. So we were like, this is great, we have practice, we've had quite an experience that went wrong, but that taught us a lot. So let's kind of try to take aspects of that time and try to see what worked and what didn't work, and actually come up with a methodology, with a toolbox for ourselves, that we said. And we made the project about learning and like different learning spaces that we've been in, or different ways in which that we learn from one another. And so after having 1 year of long sessions online, which actually had a quite set structure. Each session would start with a grounding session, a grounding exercise, or a meditation. So basically, each time we met, someone would lead this exercise, and we would try to meet in a mental, imaginary space as bodies, basically, because like we're all living in different time zones and we're all kind of in quarantine, so we would kind of create the space collectively and try to meet each other there. One time I described the GARP Sessions headquarters, as we call it, the house that GARP Sessions meetings takes place in, and we met at a school in Costa Rica, and one time we met at someone's tip of their nose, so it was like quite different each time, but we would start with that so that we would also like ground ourselves and like be aware of our bodies, sort of in the absence of bodies getting together. And then we would move on to what we called impulses, which was we would just bring in just basically anything. It can be a text that we've been reading, it can be an artwork, it can be a story, it can be an anecdote, some gossip. So it was just like throwing everything into this pile in a very fast pace. And then we would move on to the third and last part, which is mapping. We decided we wanted to sort of map all these things that we've been talking about in our meetings and which mattered to us during this 1 year that we were confined. And we also tried to, we thought of these maps as like speculative maps that weren't necessarily about our thoughts or kind of our more intellectual practices, but we were also bringing things that are more sensual, things, things that are quite bodily, maybe someone's breakup that we were talking about. So it was like everything that really informed our thinking through that 1 year, because we thought knowledge or learning is not limited to the mind, so we have to take into consideration what we're feeling as a body or what we're going through in our personal lives. So it's a quite, like, it's not necessary, not everything is quite accessible when you look at the map. It's a bit abstract, but we kind of like, this is the first map that we did, and we developed a strategy which really worked for us, and we found a way to represent it visually. And then after the first map, we decided to invite people into our relationship, basically. And we invited, the first collaborator was Desiree Corral. Desiree is an artist from Ecuador, and we had 3 sessions with her on Zoom, and in the first session, she asked us, all of us, to find a plant and spend 1 week kind of getting to know this plant. So we would go visit our plant every day, spend time with the plant, tell stories, I don't know, sing to the plant, and we were trying to build this relationship with our individual plants. And then she has a weaving practice, so the second and third workshops, she taught us how to weave, and the entire session, I think they were each 2.5, 3 hours long, happened as we were weaving. So we had these conversations as we were doing something with our hands, which really kind of like changes how the conversation flows and how you're kind of entering the dialogue. So we ended up making this map at the end for Desiree. So it is a lot of the things that came up in our conversations, but it was also from our individual experiences with our plants, and again, within our bodies, and sort of during these encounters that we had with Desiree. So these maps are quite, I would say they're quite intimate, but also I think they became an important part of our practice because they really allows us to question what learning is and what learning somehow involves, and how we can do it differently, basically. This is kind of like a draft that we put together before we made the final map. And then we did a residency with School of Commons in 2021, where we actually did a workshop on speculative mapping, where we asked people to imagine a learning situation or a learning space and basically start from there to go through all these stages again, like kind of thinking, asking questions like, how does your body feel? Are you sitting on the floor? Is there food in this room? Or, like, how do you feel shy to make a comment or ask a question? Or do you feel encouraged, or do you feel safe in this space? So we were asking all these questions that would trigger certain their imaginations, basically, and we tried to, and then we we divided into groups, and everyone put together a map. I don't have images of the maps because they did not want to share them. They thought it was too intimate, and we were like, this is the point. But so this is kind of like again, a draft that we did online with the entire group before they put their maps together. And this is a publication that actually just came out last week as an outcome of this residency with School of Commons, where for 1 year throughout the residency, we conducted interviews with other collectives that were part of this residency, and we asked them how they work together, and we told them to give us some tips or some insights into their relationships and their working methodologies. And what we did was we talked to 5 collectives, and we took one aspect from their practice that really resonated with us and that we thought we would learn a lot from. And then we kind of made this inventory, we call it that, where you have an element from their working methodology, and then you have a description, and then we had an exercise that would allow us to kind of practice this element. So before I move on to this, these 2 practices this is what I'm writing my dissertation about as well, and I think they're at the very core of my curatorial practice, which is almost always with collaborators. And they're important because I have been trying to explore what else the curatorial can do beyond engaging with artworks and displaying them, but how can we create more spaces and encounters where people can learn from one another in different ways that we don't necessarily do within institutional contexts. So it's basically through being attentive, like the body is at the very center again in all of my, I think all my projects and research, and basically how can we be more attentive to our bodies and our needs and build relationships with others that we would learn from as a result, and basically how to create these spaces for ourselves. But sometimes I also make exhibitions around these topics and themes when I think, they allow me to understand something in a way that these other practices or these other projects would not allow me to do. This is a recent project that I co-curated with Amelie Vedal in Berlin in last April. The exhibition is called Reciprocity Muscles, and it brings together works by 6 artists. 7 artists, 1 artist duo. And the idea was that we asked these 7 people how in their daily lives they engage with other than human beings, and kind of how they learn from other ways of being in the world in a daily manner, basically. And so they all responded to this question through their works, and then we called the exhibition Reciprocity Muscles, because we said we are always having relationships with the world beyond the human, let's say, and with like nature and with other animals and bacteria and viruses, especially within the body, and how do we sort of be attentive to these relationships and build muscles, build reciprocity muscles that allows us to really learn from these relationships. And I'm just gonna show some works and not go into the description of the works because I don't think I have enough time. And then the last one is, this is the most recent exhibition I curated in Istanbul this September with artists Ülgen Semerci, Deborah Chujinov, and Olivia Strange. The exhibition title was Sweet Garden of Vanishing Desires, in which I was sort of questioning how do we seek pleasure and how do we follow certain desires in a time of loss and death and climate change, and basically during a time of grieving, collectively grieving. And the 3 artists all responded from very different scales and I think entry points to the question. Ülgen Semerci made these are some installation views of the exhibition. I think the most personal one was from Ülgen Semerci. She produced this work which is called Love is a Hierarchy, based on a breakup that she was going through at the time. She made this 8-meter long ceramics chain as she was while her grieving process was continuing, and as well as a video that sort of questioned certain power dynamics within loving and caring relationships. And Olivia Strange's work is sort of an ode to her grandmother, who was a sort of closeted queer woman in the 1930s, and she made 2 cakes side by side. You can see them here, which throughout her own coming out process as a queer woman, and sort of to represent this connection she had to her grandmother. And then the last work by Deborah Chujinov, which is called An Uvu in the middle, and then the 2 works are called The City of Gold and City of Copper. And Uvu, the word Uvu comes from the Mongolian shamanism, where people, to kind of remark something, an event, a life event that has happened, it can be a death, but it can also be a marriage, birth, to sort of mark this event. They build these structures, especially high in the mountains or in the middle of a vast piece of land, to basically say that someone has experienced quite strong here. And she made this uvu for the video works. Maybe I should talk about them a little bit. The 2 video works are part of a series that has 5 more videos, and she speculates a future where the continents come together again to form a supercontinent. And in this continent there are 7 cities, and each city has 1 resource, and we don't know if there's any human life in this continent, but we get the sense that there is some life happening, especially in the one in the City of Copper, the one on the right you see the shadow of a jellyfish, and the other one also kind of like there. If when you're really close, you see certain like animals crawling on the rocks. So there is a sense that there is some life, but I guess the world as we know it has changed. And she basically has made an uvu to commemorate the planet that has died, that is no longer what it is right now, but that has become something else. So there's something optimistic and still hopeful about it as well. So as much as it's to remember what has been lost, it's also a kind of like an opening up to what's to come, basically. And yeah, I think I'm gonna stop here. This is the last project that I've done, and I have a copy of the Garb Sessions book if you want to take a look at it. And yeah, thank you.
Would someone like to ask something, Deniz, now, before we move to Carla? Of course, we'll have time afterwards to discuss, but maybe something pending? Yes, of course. George?
Hello. Can you elaborate a little bit on the aesthetics of some of those charts and graphics, particularly who's making them, what significance do they have on a completely aesthetic level? And I ask that primarily because there's a lot of conceptual underpinning to what you're talking about, but I also found that there seems like there's a lot of effort being put into those. So I'm wondering, is there an end game for those? Elaborate on basically the pure aesthetics of these.
I mean, maybe to begin with the first one. Well, first of all, Sofia did them. She, during the quarantine, she sort of like self-taught in design and Photoshop and all. Like she became really interested in graphic design, and she made them. But for the first one, I think what we initially did, we found it really difficult to categorize all these things that were coming up in the sessions. And at one point we were like, we had, you know, hours of transcriptions of our talks, artworks, but also like a lot of anecdotes and stories and you know, other kind of material that came up. And we were like, we weren't sure how they came together, but we also realized that it wasn't just about these more theoretical or artistic research that we were sort of curating, where we were kind of using to make certain connections, but it was actually all these other things as well, you know, like how one of us got into this like yoga practice because they couldn't do anything else in the house. So I don't know, it was just the fact, or like recipes that we were making at the time. So I think it was like the first struggle was to find a way to categorize them. And then what we did was we, first of all, we created this list on the left side. We were like, okay, what are some of the things that we've been talking about? And then I guess these words came up, and then we're like, but it's almost as if within these categories we have subcategories. Like if we're talking about space, we talk about it from a more theoretical point of view, but we're also talking about how we're, you know, how we're rearranging our living rooms, but we're also talking about how sharing the space with our partners is changing our relationships. I don't know. So we realized, okay, within each element on the left, we have subcategories. So we were like kind of trying to, and I mean, this is the final version, but before we got there, we had all these like tiny grids and then like more sort of more lines basically. But at one point, yeah, and then we within, I mean, it sounds too complicated when I'm going too much into detail, but we figured out like, okay, some of these things that go in different boxes also connect with one another. So we just like basically started drawing lines. And I mean, I don't think we had an end goal. Like when we first started this, we didn't even plan to make it into a map and share it with other people, but it was just so that we can understand and kind of like establish it as a methodology for us and then like repeat it basically in every meeting or in every project, which then we realized this is not about, like we don't even have a topic that we're delving into, but we're actually trying to understand what's happening between us. Like we're really trying to understand this relationship. So I think like the aesthetics is just quite I don't think it's quite arbitrary, and Sophia made them, but there is like a lot of drafts that we had until we got there, which is basically a lot more words and writing as well. And then at one point we just tried to make it much more simpler. And I mean, this one's quite obvious. It's a weaving. I always forget the name for this. So yeah, we just basically tried to then apply a similar methodology, but put it on a, what is it called again? The work, the one that's the verb. Exactly, and that.
So say it so that everybody.
I cannot say it.
Warp
Warp.
and weft.
Weft.
Warp and weft.
Weft. Warp and weft. So yeah, they're kind of like a bit abstract because all the other information is missing, but all these like kind of texts, and because we're all writers as well, so we usually how we think is through writing, and then at one point we have to find a way to visualize this and communicate this without explaining everything that we're talking about or everything, like why everything matters in these meetings basically. And yeah, and in the workshop, that was actually quite interesting because we asked the people to find their own methodology then to visualize it, and every single map looked very different, and we were like, we would never do it this way, you know, we needed the grids and we needed the lists, so yeah, and I'm gonna stop here.
Carla, please. Thank you, Deniz.
Thank you.
Hi. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Thank you, ARCAthens, for bringing me to Greece. Such an amazing experience to be in this country, such an amazing experience to be in this residency. Pure joy. So my name is Carla Maldonado. I'm a lens-based Brazilian artist. And by lens-based, I mean that I use my camera a lot. So I make videos and I make photographs and some little things in between those. And as a Brazilian artist, I make work about my country, but I also lived in New York for 9 years. So my work kind of speaks about a little bit of the politics of both intertwined, and also mixes beautiful imagery, I can't help it, with social commentary, bringing to light political issues like capitalism, climate change, LGBTQA+ rights, colonialism, and which are intrinsically related in the lens of ecofeminism. And I'd like to pause here and talk a little bit about ecofeminism. I'm not going to read the whole text, but I'm going to read a little bit about it. It says, the defilement of our planet's ecosystem is the direct result of humans' obsession with oil, power, and control. Drilling and extracting resources at the cost of grabbing and exploiting indigenous lands and colonizing and enslaving people has resulted in environmental effects that cross the planet's environmental boundaries. Ecofeminism, as both an intersectional movement and critical theory, is useful for analyzing oppressive hierarchical systems and seeing how they are intertwined. Sexism, racism, homophobia, and transphobia are systemic forms of oppression that shape our relationships with each other by designing a hierarchical pyramid. This pyramid defines a person's rights, freedom of movement, and access to resources. This translates into how natural spaces are accessed and exploited. When lands and what they have to offer are turned into a commodity by the oppressor, this system allows access only to those willing to pay, creating an unequal distribution of resources that are essential to the survival of the oppressed groups. We all know what's going on in the world, and I think that kind of rings a bell with current state of things. But I'm going to go back a little bit to 2016, when Trump got elected. And At the time, I was living in New York as an immigrant and listening to all of the hate speeches about building walls and sexist speaks, and I just couldn't help but photographing my way through protests where I was finding community and also kind of grieving through a creative output. And then I started educating myself a little bit more. That's when I encountered ecofeminism, actually, so I could see everything intertwined in white supremacy and finding, you know, my mortal enemy. And then, of course, this outcomes doesn't just stay in America as, you know, this modern imperial country that kind of colonizes culturally a lot of other ones, especially South America and Latin America in general, Central America included. And then the outcomes of this election is this like new wave of social and political conservatism in Latin America in general, and of course in Brazil. And during that time, a little bit before Bolsonaro got elected, through beautiful patterns of life, I encountered a way to Manaus, where a friend was living, and I find this beautiful indigenous community that at the beginning invited me to stay with them for a weekend, and then it turned out to be a whole month, basically, of me just like becoming really close with them, establishing this friendship, and learning a lot about society and the way things could be a lot more generous, having a lot of hope, understanding it could be more about people and less about money, and also not to romanticize them because the way that they lived was through tourism is the tiny piece of land where they were sent to by just having to move all the time through, you know, mining and drug dealers that were just displacing them from their original lands. And in this place, there was all these different indigenous groups from different places that kind of found home. And, you know, I was welcomed to be with them for a little bit. And when I encountered them, it was right before Bolsonaro gets elected, so like 6 months before he becomes the president. And then we kept in touch. I went back there right after the elections happened, and I made work about it. What you're seeing in the screen is this 4-channel video installation during the time that I was in there, when I was documenting my way through it. And I'd like to share a little bit of the video so you understand what Bolsonaro has planned for the Amazon forest as soon as he gets in power.
Estou aqui fazendo um sobrevoo com o presidente Jair Bolsonaro.
If it works.
Chegou ainda há pouco aqui em Manaus. Tudo bem, presidente? Tudo bem, graças a Deus. Obrigado pela acolhida. A Amazônia é estratégia para o Brasil. Tanto é que o mundo está de olho aqui. Mas mudou o governo federal, mudou o estadual. E a Amazônia é nossa. E nós vamos todos trabalhar para que esse estado, essa região maravilhosa, cada vez mais seja integrada ao Brasil e mais nossa. Nós estamos chegando aqui na Newton Lins. E daqui a pouco nós vamos lá para a Suprama e vamos falar sobre proteção da Zona Franca e também da BR-319, né, presidente? Se Deus quiser, boas notícias para todo mundo. Um abraço.
And throughout the film, I kind of document my way getting in the city, showing a little bit how industrial it is, and getting myself away from the industrial side of it, getting in a boat, and finally getting to the indigenous community that I'm documenting and spending time with. And the audio part of it, most of it will be me reading the news, kind of foreseeing what's going to happen.
2018. These are the news today. Brazil's new leader promises to exploit the Amazon. The president-elect wants to harvest the rainforest riches. raising fears among environmentalists and indigenous communities.
Não, obrigada. And then through the time, since I went back there after the elections happened, we also speak a little about what changed and what they're going through. This is me getting in the community, finding this piece of land burning. Not happy about that, not at all. And this little part.
Bolsonaro, quando ele começou a fazer comício, não sei o que, eu não gostei não. Quando ele ganhou, eu chorei. Ele falou que ele vai tirar todas as terras indígenas. Porque ele não gosta de indígena.
FUNAI, the department established.
And I feel like when I was doing this work, I also had a need to find a way out of this, right? I couldn't just think that, Bolsonaro was going to just burn everything and everything was going to go to the grounds and there was no way out. So as the story goes, I end my film with some found footage that I got from this amazing woman, Sônia Guajajara, which is now the Minister of Indigenous People of Brazil. Thank you, Lula, our new president. Wonderful. And she is kind of trying to take care of the damage that has happened for 4 years during Bolsonaro's presidency. And Sônia Guajajara was kind of like the hero, the only person that I could look up to and see a change, because she was very much into politics. She was educating indigenous girls to be in politics as well. And I was lucky enough to meet her when she went to the UN in New York to speak about, for the climate summit in 2019 with many other indigenous leaders, and we established a friendship. She invited me to go around with her during the protests, during the talks she was giving, and I just kept making work about the Amazon forest, what was going on, how it was getting damaged by Bolsonaro. And this is me just kind of like sometimes utilizing the footage again for some site-specific installations and digesting the news now without being an audio, but printing the news, one of them being Chaos, Chaos, Chaos, a journey through Bolsonaro's Amazon inferno. And trying to just call attention to what was going on. And this is one of the iterations that I mixed photography. So in the contact sheet on this part, you can see that there's a photograph of this weird installation that I find in the middle of the Amazon. And then I printed it in canvas, painted the TVs, and projected a video on it. And this is when the Amazon forest was burning in a very large scale, in a super scary way, while Bolsonaro goes on the news and says that the Amazon's not burning, the forest is too humid for that. That's not possible, and doesn't do anything about it. And I kept making work about it. This is work that I showed at Art Basel in 2020, something like that. Using that photograph with projection on the background, and then the footage of the interviews that I was doing with the indigenous people when they were, indigenous leaders when they were in the UN climate summit. And COVID happens. And then I started learning, I got to the book Glitch Feminism, and I started reading about how related this was with ecofeminism in a way, but kind of offering escape out of the system. acknowledging the way that race, class, and sexuality and other identities intersect with gender in complex ways, and addressing this intersection, but also seeking social justice, bridging this connection, and analyzing it as a white supremacy main issue. So we're still talking about the same thing, but now we're kind of finding an output that's this glitch in the system, this way out of it. And meanwhile, I'm quarantining in my studio, playing with projectors, projecting the ocean, kind of not knowing what to do, making weird sculptures with gloves and tissue boxes and vodka bottles, which I was consuming a lot at that time. And me and my fellows at the AIM Bronx Museum program, we got a New York City grants to do a group show, and I chose to kind of put this weird circuits that I was working on, glitching it with a live stream video with this camera that you see right here in the corner, kind of like placing the spectator in the middle of this glitch. And in the videos, when you can see something happening besides what you're showing in the live stream, I have this beach that is in New York called Riz, which is a place for queer community together. That doesn't really, it exists in a different way now. They're trying to get rid of it, but I'm sure that the queers will find a way to get another place or to resist in that same location. And then, well, the last work that I'd like to talk about is the most recent one that happened this March. I was invited to a residency in the Rockaway Beach, so very close to this Riz queer beach that I'm talking about, but not the queer side of it. And I wasn't so familiar with that, but when I get there for my residency, I find this crazy landscape with these concrete blocks in the middle of the sand, and like very not inviting for anyone to enjoy what's going on and enjoy the beach itself. It was also during the winter time. And then I learned that they are rebuilding the beach because of Hurricane Sandy that happened, 10 years ago? And it's almost like $1 billion project. So the peninsula doesn't get washed away by the ocean. And there are many questions about who's funding this. And then we find out that there's this new urban wellness scape and this new hotel that, what is the real estate evaluation of this? And then I started imagining what would happen if this was a third world country and we didn't have $1 billion to rebuild a peninsula. And I made a film in collaboration with the other residents that is called Sandwich. It's a story of this deity of the beach that sees everybody leaving because nobody can stay in this beach anymore because it's gonna get washed away by the ocean. And she's very lonely and very sick because she doesn't have the offerings that people would give her anymore. She's abandoned by everyone, and the beach is sick as well, so she kind of tries to stick with the remains of what people left to her to still enjoy and to still exist in this beach. And then I'll show a little bit of it. I can't show it all, but you can always ask me for the links. Surprise, I got the entire film. Well, Konstantinos told me, okay, I could do it, so I did it. And that's it. This is all I have to share today. Thank you.
I'm very conscious about the time, but we can have some questions. Okay. Starting with you, Deniz, what did you expect to find in this residency?
Okay, so I'm in a quite intense writing. I'm supposed to be in a quite intense writing period for my dissertation. So, and I'm writing actually the friendship chapter, which is very much related to our work as topsoil. So I was kind of interested in exploring more stories of friendship in Greece. First of all, like, I mean, one of the main pieces of text around friendship comes from Aristotle. So I was like, what other narratives, perhaps more stories of female friendships that I can find in Greece, which is definitely not what I'm doing. I've had some, I've been thinking a lot about death and grief since I got here. I think this is somehow related to the last exhibition that I showed here, the Sweet Garden of Vanishing Desires, which is a lot about grieving. And since I got here, I've been also interested in the archaeological cemeteries and being in Keramikos. So I think I ended up thinking about something completely different than I initially intended to. But yeah, at this point, I'm just meeting a lot of artists and thinking about death.
Okay. How about you, Carla? What did you find?
I found many things. Definitely found a lot of inspiration. I found many similarities in between Athens and Rio de Janeiro, which is my hometown, which is wild to me because it's so far away. There's just like, I could not see that coming, but I feel so at home in here, and I started to kind of question why and what was this thing, what was this similarity, what was this proximity. And then a few conversations with some amazing people from ARCAthens kind of got me to the idea of culturally having paganism as a big part of it. And my religion in Brazil is called candomblé, which is a religion that came from enslaved people that came from Africa, mixed with the indigenous people that were in Brazil, and mixed with a little bit of Christianity, and like in a huge pot, there was one thing.
Syncretic.
Yeah, very pagan, and syncretic in many different ways. And I feel like ancient Greek religion, based on Greek mythology and all the different gods and the way that nature plays a role in the religion itself, and not accepting the binaries of things, not accepting right and wrong, but kind of like something in the way, like all the good has its bad and all the bad has its good. So I'm kind of investigating this a little bit, and I'm doing a lot of research in both of them, and even finding similarities in gods from both of entities, I would say more so, from both of these places. Yeah, so I'm researching a lot about that, and I'm interested in rituals that kind of connect both of them.
Deniz, one of the things that supposedly, I mean, many people share this view of Athens as a place which has a vivid alternative art scene, and also a lot of art, grassroots initiatives. Maybe that's the differentiating thing about Athens. I will ask you, because you seem your practice-based research is very much standing on communities and communal work. Did you find something similar here in Athens? And in which way can you profit maybe in your own strategies by these encounters? Did you meet people?
Yes, that was also something I was quite interested in, like seeing how these artist-run spaces and more independent structures in Athens work, because that was also part of my research at one point. I was especially looking into initiatives and collectives working in Turkey, but also I've done some workshops with international independent structures in the past year. So this is also actually something I'm really interested in. I've been to many of these spaces, and I've also met some curators who have been doing research on that. Recently I learned that there is a publication coming out which looks into the kind of histories of different independent spaces in Athens. So yeah, I'm really interested in that as well.
The second part of my question to you is, what are the similarities and differences between the art scene here and also the art scene in Istanbul, at least the one pre the last elections? Are there any similarities? Because also Istanbul has been, the contemporary art scene has been founded by these initiatives.
Yeah. I think there's actually a lot of similarities. One of the main issues here seems to be sustainability and kind of continuity, which with most of these independent art spaces especially, I've noticed that there's so many of them, but they're not necessarily always active, or they're not able to kind of have like a sustainable structure that works for them. And I think this is, again, like the same situation in Istanbul, and I think the main challenge is funding. I don't know how it's here, but in Turkey we have only a little bit of private funding and basically zero governmental support for the arts. So I don't know the specific conditions here, but I think these spaces kind of tend to just appear and disappear quite quickly, and they're not necessarily going on for a very long time or able to, be sustainable.
True. That's the hard facts of running a space like that.
Which is also fine. I think, sorry to interrupt, but I think sometimes, which is what we're always thinking about, like ARP sessions and these projects that I shared as well, like they also, maybe they're meant to die at one point, rather than just keeping on going. It's also important to kind of understand that sometimes they need to transform into something else, or perhaps if they're not able to continue, it's okay to let them die, I think.
Sure. So, going back to you, Candomblé, which, Carla, you've been working with, of course, the number one issue of today, which is the catastrophe that we're all experiencing. The ecological disaster is ante portas for everyone. Already it's here. Many people say that this is irreversible. And you came to a place that, as you said, has many similarities to the culture and maybe the psyche of the Rio people. Going to places, because I know that you've been to many places around, not only in Athens, but also traveled a bit, have seen some, the landscape, have been visiting some islands maybe. Also visiting Eleni Milonas, who's been working with something similar, the findings from the sea and the washed out material, etc. Do you think that there are some practices that we need to instill in our art scene that you have found that they're useful as tools and we haven't deployed yet? Because I believe that the ecological theme is not exactly to the point that it should be in the agenda of the art agenda, the everyday art agenda in Athens.
I wish I had an answer for that. You mean to be able to communicate the urgency of working on
Partly,
these things?
yes, and also the activist part.
I feel like the activist part, the way that you can just shine a light in a subject and hope people to understand what you're talking, understanding the urgency of it. Of course, you're always making work for other people to see, right? We don't, especially film, we don't make films just for ourselves.
Sure.
That's not realistic. I feel like maybe a strategy would be kind of like subtle ways to include this message or speak about climate change, ecofeminism, and all of that in the work, so people don't immediately turn their head and turn around and don't, because a lot of people just don't want to hear it. They just don't want to see it. A lot of people just have this energy of just like being defeated by it and not knowing what to do, but also not doing anything practical, even though they know that there are like little acts that you can always do. In the end of the day, like the whole power is in the bigger corporations for sure, but I feel like, you know, making work that kind of just delivers the message with a little bit of, you know, kind of just like sneaking in your brain. So like working with an imagery that it's kind of beautiful and doing something that kind of involves a person, you kind of just like get in their heads and they just keep thinking about it. So I feel like that's a strategy that I've been thinking a lot about, just because, you know, I had some work before that I was showing here too, that a lot of people would just not want to look at it because they didn't want to be bothered with the news, they didn't want to be bothered with the information that I was delivering. So maybe kind of like getting in their brains and making it sexy so they just can't stop thinking about it. Maybe that's the strategy that I'm thinking about now.
Although you do have some sister souls like Eleni here that are dealing with exactly the same issues. Have you at some point felt the urge to raise your camera and shoot here? Did you take some?
Yes, I have.
Tell us something.
Something that I've filmed?
Yes. Something that you shoot.
Well, I have been just documenting some things along the way. I have some videos of, well, there's something that I really wanted to do. First of all, I came to Athens not knowing about the grittiness of the city, especially the center. So I even told Konstantinos I saw an image of a rooftop, kind of a rooftop that was looking to the Acropolis, and it was just so gritty and so beautiful. And I'm like, Konstantinos, how can I get this view? And it was just like, I don't know, like the top of a building or something. And then I was able to get in on top of a hotel and film the rooftop parts of it with like all the like grittiness and dirtiness of everything with the Acropolis in the background. And it was like a morning light situation, which the light here is just, you know, unparalleled. It's just wonderful. So I was able to, I don't know what I'm doing with this footage yet, but that's something that I filmed, and that stayed in my mind since I filmed it.
Deniz, two of the subjects that you're dealing with is the gut and love. And they're both very much to my heart, and also the combination of those two. In fact, we use the moniker the gut for my lab because it has that kind of shape. And also, I believe there's psychoanalytically so much to say about this thing. What is the underbelly of Athens? Have you met it?
That's a very difficult question. We have to go out. We have to. I don't think I have. Maybe this is why I was so drawn to the idea of death, because I came with the intention to think and write about friendship and love. And I think, I don't know, I've been like really interested in the root, like I was just having some conversations before this talk, but like how I've been to most of the cemeteries and the archaeological sites, and I think I'm more drawn to the ruins and the past and things that have been lost and things that no longer than, you know, because I mean my work and writing really addresses like mostly it's about like how we can do things differently and how we can imagine a life or like kind of a future that's quite different than the one that we're in. So it's actually much more future oriented and kind of optimistic as well. But I think I'm kind of looking back and thinking about loss. Maybe this is, I know this does not answer your question, but maybe this is where I've found the yeah, one version of an underbelly.
Another question for you, Carla. You've been working with intentionally or unintentionally, and this is something that is new for me because seeing your work for a second time, I didn't make any correlations with Cantoble and all the practice, the rituals. Do you believe that maybe this is a way for the ecofeminism to deploy tools like that, like rituals, like going back and finding magic, not just magic, but other alternative practices in order to address ecology?
Well, what I would say is some rituals that connect with nature kind of makes you a little bit more aware of what is surrounding you. So you kind of care a little bit more about what nature has for you. I also think there's something beautiful that I've heard when I spent time in this indigenous community. I told this to a lot of people already, but I'll say it again. They taught me that it's wild to have a name for nature because we are nature. So why do we have this language that we have a name for something that is just the same thing, distincted from us? And ecofeminism speaks about too, like how complicated it is that we have something as binary as like nature versus culture, nature versus science, nature feminine, blah, blah, blah, blah. And culture and science masculine, you know, like that's wild. And then I feel like some of those rituals, independent of what kind of religion you have, but just looking at nature as something divine, just respecting nature as, you know, independent of the religion you have, but as this entity that kind of gave birth to us and is part of who we are, I think it's a good start.
At some point you told me that you go to swim, you went to swim at 7 o'clock in the morning or something like that. This is something that we don't usually do, the Greeks. We don't go that early at the beach.
That's why I did it.
But I felt when you said that there's a kind of cleansing and a kind of ritual for you to go at that time during the dawn in a beach. Have you found any small things, small practices that maybe will enhance your practice during your stay?
I don't think I found them here. I think that I had them with me. I feel like, you know, like what does one do at the beach at 7 a.m., 7:30, swimming alone? Like we can swim naked. And then you can just connect with the ocean in a different way. And, you know, my religion, you have Poseidon here, but in my religion we have Iemanjá, which is like this woman form of this entity of the ocean. And I always felt very connected with her. Every January 2nd of every year, we give her white flowers and throw a big party to her in Brazil, in Rio, and in many different places. It's just, the beach gets crowded and we celebrate her. So I feel like just by getting in the ocean, being able to swim, I always have conversations with her. And I think it's a very intimate time that we have together. If the beach is completely alone, then I have time to really focus on that conversation. And you always get in the ocean, you salute her, and then you thank her for something that she did for you or something really good that happened, and then you ask for something right after. So there is this like kind of, you know, ways to communicate with her so she listens to you.
Before we give the spotlight to our audience to ask you some questions and maybe engage in some conversation, I would like, because both of you didn't know each other and you spent quite some time together, I asked Ari, how did those two get along together? And he told me they are doing pretty well together. I would like to ask you, would you like to ask each other one question that you haven't asked so far?
Oh, we talk about everything.
Now, watching your practice once again, maybe. Watching your practice once again, maybe something rises.
I mean, I don't want to ask a question about your practice because we've done that. We've had some, like I've seen her work and we did have some conversations about the work, but I've also been, like we've been observing each other's like daily routines and daily practices, and I'm really inspired by Carla's, like she has, I feel like you're someone who has a strong routine that you don't like to break, which is not how I am at all. You know, I do things once and I tend to not do them. Like I don't really do everything quite constantly, so, I mean, or regularly. And I want to ask a question about that, but I don't know how to formulate the question. But do you, I mean, it's maybe similar to what you asked her. Like, do you feel like there is something that you're gonna, there's a new habit that you're gonna take from here and apply to your life in Brazil or New York, or like something new that you developed here? Is this exactly your question, or?
I don't know if it's a habit, but I hope that I keep doing, I just started my ceramics class, and I hope that I'm able to do that in Brazil too, and kind of develop this as part of my practice. I'm not sure exactly how. I do have a plan of how to do it here, but I kind of want to just keep going with it because it's such a wonderful thing to be able to just like use my hands and like shaping it, kind of like, you know, reminds me of like the editing process of a video, but in a more kind of tactical way. So I really love that.
No, I won't ask you now.
Okay. My question is, don't hate me for that. So, Deniz has been taking singing classes, and she has a wonderful voice. No, I wouldn't do that. But how do you think that your artistic practice as a singer, and you've been a dancer as well, and you do have a lot of different creative outputs that you don't, you know, show that so much to the world, but how do you think that kind of helps you through your curatorial practice, or does that help you creatively just to put something out there so you can see and look at art in a different way?
That just gave me, like, I have butterflies in my stomach. Let's talk about guts.
I'm sorry.
No worries. I'll just be vulnerable about it. I don't know why I'm taking singing classes to begin with. It just happened. I think I am interested in any practice that involves my body, which is a passion, a curiosity, the only kind of constant tool that I have to be in life, I feel. So I'm really interested in exploring a lot of things with bodies. And I think singing, because it is something that I feel really vulnerable doing, and I have no like previous experience in, or like, it's something that really scares me, and that puts me in a vulnerable position. And I've been writing a lot about vulnerability, and sometimes I find it hard to be vulnerable actually and to practice it. So I think this is why I'm doing it. I don't know if I will ever perform in front of an audience. I probably will, but I think I see it more as a practice of vulnerability in that sense, and basically be able to engage with some of these theories and ideas that I'm preaching about, but don't find a lot of moments in my life to actually practice. So here I am doing it right now.
Konstantinos has a surprise for you. He has arranged to go to karaoke today.
I love karaoke.
I didn't mean to tell it now, but since the rest should know and can follow us. So the microphone is to you. Please go ahead and ask something.
I'm going to follow up with what you're asking them. So ceramics and singing, the first thing that comes to my mind is perhaps there's some sort of wanting, because we're all, you are both creative types. Do you find that might have something to do with getting out of your comfort zone, trying to push yourself in some way to find something different, and maybe being in a different place like Athens, where you're not in you're not in your hometowns, that you feel like this is an opportunity to go and get out of your comfort zone? Can you elaborate on maybe some of that and how that may tie into your creative practice as well?
I mean, definitely. But I think like these kind of programs and residencies and just being somewhere for a determined amount of time and knowing that you're going to leave after that, I think kind of really makes me, you know that it's not your life and you can try out things and you can develop a new routine, and it's like a quite different mentality, I think, a different mindset. And in my previous experiences as well, I try to do new things and take something from my time there and like remember it through an activity, like a new habit, or like this is maybe why I ask you that question as well. Like I kind of see it as an opportunity to do something else or be something else for a moment and learn something new. So I think this is probably, and I think we're also doing it, and I'm gonna say we, because we've been doing a few things. We've been developing new habits or new routines together as well. Like we go to the farmers market every Tuesday, and it's like a very important part of our week. Or, I think like we have certain morning routines now that we share. So I feel like, I think like this time off from your own reality or your own ways of doing things actually really opens up new paths in my thinking as well, but also like I think in a daily practice kind of way.
Yeah, it's funny because I never really saw myself as someone with like a very strong routine. And now this feels like I'm gonna call my therapist after this, because this feels like a lot of information. Yeah, that's maybe because I am out of my comfort zone, so I have to establish new routines in order to feel comfortable in it. So I can just, face everything that I have to face in the natural way. And ceramics might be one of them, but also the reason why I started my ceramics class was because Deniz, I think was the first date that we met, and we went out for a drink. And then she asked me, what did I want to do differently? Like if I wanted to try something new, what should I try? And I was just like, I don't know. And then I saw like a guy riding a motorcycle, and I'm like, maybe I want to learn how to drive a motorcycle. And then she goes, yeah, that could be cool. I can see you doing that. And then I asked her, and then she goes, maybe I'm going to start ceramic class. And I'm like, oh, I like that idea. Maybe it's easier than, riding a motorcycle. I ended up going through with it. Deniz might still, no, maybe not. Maybe I found a very rigid professor that she doesn't want to subscribe to. She's wonderful, by the way. But yeah, definitely, I feel like routines, they do ground you. So in whatever situation you are, once you have some little routines or rituals, you kind of ground yourself to who you are, and kind of make yourself as a home, as opposed to kind of having to find a common space to share. Anyway, there's so much more I could say, but I'll leave it there.
Yes, I do. I'm happy you didn't take motorcycle lessons. This is why we are here today. It's a crazy city. Anyway, I have a question for you, Carla, and I think it's almost selfish to ask, but while I was doing the research for the Office of Hydro Commons, which was an exhibition at Atopos, I was looking into ecofeminist iconography, and one of the exhibitions that I was looking at was Carla was a part of, and she saw the video that we saw at the beginning with the indigenous community. Sepia?
Sepia, yeah.
Yeah. And I was wondering if framing your practice in this ecofeminist lens and showing your work next to artists that have been historically categorized as ecofeminist, maybe how was it helpful to you? And also if you actually saw some lineage between these practices, can we say that there's some common heritage or some common aesthetics that co-shaped your practice? If you could look back at this exhibition and how you frame your work today.
I feel like the ecofeminism that I look up to, it's more of like, kind of like, I would call the new wave of ecofeminism. There is a little more intersectional that kind of, you know, looks a little bit more to other aesthetics of not only just like the womanhood as someone that gives birth, the womanhood as someone who kind of has the similarity to the body and the nature, because I'm also looking to trans women, I'm also looking to trans man, I'm also looking to other minorities that are not necessarily rooted on the like first, second wave of feminism. I do respect that work a lot, and there's so many artists in there, they're just wonderful. But I'm not sure if I look at that work and I see a lot of similarities towards mine. Is there any specific work that you're thinking about?
Well, of course, I was thinking of Betty Damon, for example, because it's one of the most significant artists in this exhibition. But also, while you were talking, I was thinking also about the medium, because we have many lens-based artists, many artists working on performance for the camera as well. So performative and lens-based practices are quite popular media for today's, let's say, queer ecofeminist practices. And I guess that maybe there you could draw more examples or more affinities. But there's so many artists working inspired by the theory of it. So what I am actually asking myself, maybe there's no answer to that yet, is if there's an ecofeminist aesthetics and how it co-shapes the artistic practice today. Why we tend to put these artists together, what's the common thread, except of the theory of the common values, where the aesthetic values are finding, where we can find common thread in aesthetic values. What aesthetic values do we share with historically claimed ecofeminist artists?
I hear you. Yeah, Betsy actually became a good friend of mine after that exhibition. She's such an interesting lady. She invited me for coffee right after she saw that I was in the exhibition, and then we started connecting very much. I feel like her work and the way that she speaks about how the rocks talk to her and how they all have souls is beautiful and very inspiring. And she also does a lot of activism work towards water and water being accessible and water being respected and things like that. And of course, there's a lot that I have to learn from her when it comes to the level of activism that she's able to do and travel the whole world with her idea and her beautiful mind. But when it comes to like the aesthetics, I don't know.
Maybe it's irrelative, but I was looking into Guatemalan art scene from the late 2000s, And I was looking into examples of Regina Jose Galindo, Sandra Monteroso, Adelia Diaz, and there's much lens-based work that shares similar affinities with your work and other works that we would claim today as ecofeminist works. So maybe we have to shift our gaze also in south to south practices.
Yeah, maybe. And I feel like I hear when you say that, it's more kind of like the urgency of documenting things in spite and just filming whatever is in front of you with, you know, not a big production and kind of telling a story and putting your body in that story as well. I see that. Thanks for pointing that.
Are there any other questions? Okay, so thank you very much for this wonderful discussion. Deniz, Carla, and Poka, thank you very much. I want to talk to you a little bit about, in conclusion, I want to bring up our upcoming program. I mentioned earlier EPI, our print shop residency at Lafayette College. I'm happy to announce that's happening in 3 weeks. And as I said, we try to keep that in the family. So Tariku Shifra will be the fellow who's going to do that residency. I would also like to acknowledge members of the board that are present here tonight, and thank you for your support, without which ARCAthens would not be possible. Similarly, there are several members of the advisory council who have generously supported our mission. Thank you very much. And thank you to our incredible staff, Athens Residency Program Manager Konstantinos Kotsis, and Executive Assistant Eleni Papaioannou. And to you, our community, for coming tonight and for warmly embracing and supporting our mission. Our fellows have all reported that their experience in Athens was life-changing, and I'm thrilled to see many deeply meaningful friendships emerge from these residencies. So let me close with some news about our NOLA NYCBX Research Fellowship, which I mentioned at the start of the evening. Its successful pilot hosted curatorial fellow Deniz Yanoglu and visual art fellow Mario Michalakakos, where they spent a month in New Orleans and a month in New York. Their experience was profound, I'm happy to report, and they were very generous with their feedback in an effort to make this an annual program. While Deniz and Maro were selected by invitation for the pilot, I'm pleased to announce that the upcoming program's fellows will be selected by an open application, which we plan on announcing in December. Artists and curators residing in Greece are eligible. Also, previous virtual fellows of ARCAthens are absolutely eligible, and I highly encourage you to follow us on Instagram and also join our mailing list on our website so you can be informed when the applications open. The applications are free of charge, and I encourage you to apply. Thank you again for joining us this evening, and thank you very much.